Asterix at the Olympic Games was by far the worst entry into the filmography of Asterix and Obelix the Gauls. And so, as one of the more successful films of this series had been a live-action version of one of the animated adaptations, it was decided to try the same thing again with another previously brought to animated life Asterix adventure. Did this strategy work out? To quote Obelix, "These film producers are crazy." Released in 2012, this film is based on the Franco-Belgian comic book Asterix in Britain by René Goscinny and Albert Uderzo, which was first published weekly in 1965, then released in full in 1966, and was made into an animated feature 20 years later. As with the previous Asterix adventure, I took one look at this trailer and felt sufficiently unhyped. Granted, had I been 10 years younger at the time, I probably would have wanted to see it. France's Marlon Brando, Gerard Depardieu, plays Obelix again, a role that was really starting to grow on him. And this time, Asterix is being played by Edouard Bière, who had played the ramblingly philosophical Otis in Mission Cleopatra. When I saw the trailer, I really wasn't convinced Edouard was the right man to play Asterix, purely due to his heavily stubbly face, and the fact he is as tall as everyone else on screen. The film's French title translates to On Her Majesty's Service, which is to do with stamps or something, and also is a reference to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, starring the one and only George Lazenby. The nod to the James Bond franchise is furthered by this film's opening credit sequence substituting seductive-esque silhouetted women for the crown jewels. So does this mean that this version of Asterix in Britain will be parodying the James Bond franchise in a manner similar to that of Johnny English?
Nope.
But the crown jewels will be playing a part in the plot, similar to that of Johnny English?
Nope.
Anyway, the English subbed version of this film has the official title of Asterix and Obelix God Save Britannia, though no one told the person in charge of the subtitles that. Also, the translators were either unaware or didn't care that most of the characters' names are supposed to be puns. Therefore, Anticlimax's name still appears as Joli Thorax. Speaking of subtitles, assuming the recently released The Secret of the Magic Potion gets one, this is the only Asterix movie not to be given an English dub.
Voilà.
Oui, allons dans la forêt, chercher des sangliers.
Voilà, je vais t'ai laissé ma phrase. Voilà, on y va.
Où ça?
We begin, as we do in the comic, with the pirates getting shipwrecked by the Roman army.
Paula?
Redbeard truly brought this on himself by having his men camouflage themselves as mist. Either that, or it was a way of foreshadowing just how dull this film will be at times. In the front line of this invasion is Julius Caesar, who has regenerated for the 4th time. In Take on Caesar, he was a pretty spot-on representation of the character depicted in the comics. In Mission Cleopatra, he was a lot younger and a lot less serious. At the Olympic Games, he was back to being a grand old fart. And in this film, he's kind of a blend of 2 and 3. Chief, My Kingdom for Norse, is replaced by the Queen.
The Queen?
The monarchy didn't exist back in the BC era, and neither did the Union Jack. What is this, a comedic kids' film or something? Buckingham Village is under attack, which none of the stiff-lipped Britons are concerned about. The Roman army, notoriously shit. This is Anticlimax, who according to the Queen has been knighted, and according to his outfit should really be a stereotypical Scot instead of a stereotypical upper-middle-class Englishman.
Vous voulez demander de l'aide à des Gaulois? Je me demande s'il ne serait pas préférable de nous laisser envahir.
smashing.
The next morning, in one small village of invincible Gauls, we are reunited with Asterix, Obelix, and most importantly, Just for Kicks. Wait, what? Yep, this film is also based on the comic that came directly after it, Asterix and the Normans, which got its own animated adaptation only 6 years prior to this movie. And quite frankly, the inclusion of that story within this story really peeves me off. There are over 35 Asterix adventures in existence. Only 10 have been made into films. Why not use plot elements from Asterix in Spain, and have the child of a chief that the Romans are after accompany our heroes on their journey, instead of using angsty Just for Kicks whose story arc has already been covered in a film? However, they did make a tremendous improvement on this character by making him such a cocky prat that Asterix punches him. The only other recurring villagers to appear are Chief Vital Statistics, who seems to have had a stroke after the Olympic Games, and an equally subdued Impedimenta. Getafix is mentioned, Unhygienix's shop is in shot, and Just for Kicks describes himself as a bard, yet Cacophonix remains unseen or heard. They could have filmed this scene inside the chief's hut so these absences would have been less noticeable, and as much as the Olympic Games movie really wasn't Asterix's movie, they at least made sure to feature cameos from all the iconic inhabitants of the village.
Anticlimax! My first cousin once removed! Shall we shake hands?
In the original story, Anticlimax is Asterix's cousin, but here they aren't relations, or even acquaintances. Yet Just for Kicks is still said to be Vital Statistics' nephew, because obviously we're more intrigued to learn about Droopy's family bio than the title characters.
On amène Goudurix avec nous.
Mais non, c'est pas possible, avec une des filles, tu n'auras pas la place.
Ce voyage est une excellente occasion pour parfaire son éducation.
Oh ben non.
I'll never forget, say goodbye. I believe in the day, say goodbye.
Je préfère emmener l'autre andouille, là, le...
They don't encounter the pirates while crossing the channel. Guess they all drowned. So in exchange, we meet what I'm sure you'll find to be the most memorable thing about this film.
Pardon de m'imposer ainsi dans votre embarcation, noble voyageur.
A stowaway! In blackface. What's fantastic about this is that as Baba the Pirate Lookout, aka the only recurring black person in this series, had been replaced by a whiter actor, I assumed that this was a change made on behalf of racial sensitivity. The actor playing
Je m'appelle Pain d'épices.
is neither black nor Indian. And believe me, I'm not someone who completely blacklists films and TV shows that contain politically incorrect elements. One of my favourite sitcoms is It Ain't Our Fault, Mum. But this was made in 2012. The excuse of, back then, we couldn't find a Pakistani actor to play a Pakistani is no longer eligible. If they wanted an actor with a dark shade of skin to play an Indian, why didn't they hire an Indian actor with said shade of skin? Considering this character could also have been Chinese, I'm guessing it was a toss-up between which was cheaper, brown shoe polish or yellow paint. By the way, the conversation leading up to the Indians' exposure involves Just for Kicks and Anticlimax teasing Asterix and Obelix for clearly being a gay couple.
On ne vit pas ensemble, on habite ensemble. C'est-à-dire, c'est plus c'est comme une colocation en fait.
Such a discussion was also something that the comics sorely needed. I'm sure Goscinny would have got round to it had he lived longer. Arriving in Britain, our heroes discover that the reason the Romans are having such difficulty in conquering Anticlimax's village is because they're too busy reenacting the birds.
C'est pour dîner?
Plutôt, oui. Nous voudrions 4 sangliers, c'est possible?
The British invented fast food? Oh, I'm learning so much today.
Bonsoir.
Non, donne une seconde, c'est bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
Non, c'est bonsoir, tu sais, avec un accent tonique sur le A.
My flowers are beautiful!
Once their ruse is inevitably blown by Obelix, they fight off the Romans, off-screen, and Asterix tells his dim friend that he hates him.
C'est que même quand tu es là, je me sens seul. Je me sens seul intellectuellement. Je suis sous-alimenté en intelligence avec toi.
Et pourtant, on s'entend bien.
Non, je te supporte, c'est pas pareil. Le moment est venu pour moi de rencontrer quelqu'un. Qui? Mais je sais pas. Mais en tout cas, c'est certainement pas en restant collé à toi que je vais y arriver.
I suppose being a 52-year-old virgin would make anyone a bit agitated. This film is so pumped with adrenaline that now we have a scene of Caesar getting audited.
Ça, c'est Cléopâtre qui est venue passer le week-end.
Elle ne prend pas de ligne régulière, Cléopâtre.
C'est la reine d'Égypte, quand même.
Et si c'est la reine d'Égypte, pourquoi c'est pas l'Égypte qui paie?
A solution is provided by an ancient relative of that ratty unnamed villain in the Lucky Luke comic Nitroglycerine. He suggests they hire Vikings to attack the village, to save having to pay the army to do it. They could have kept this story more grounded in Britishness by hiring the Scots, Irish or Welsh to attack the English, but the eager savages find it too difficult to cope with the slightly warmer climate. The Normans agree, but only because they want to be taught how to be frightened, as in the comic, they believe fear gives you wings. A logical ideology to anyone suffering from frostbite of the brain. Instead of travelling straight to the village, because after all, what's the hurry? It's not like the Queen is in danger, Anticlimax takes the Gauls to visit his fiancée, Ophelia, who both Just for Kicks and Asterix are keen on Phelan, while Obelix is smitten by her guardian, Miss Mackintosh. He really lowered his standards after being rejected by Panacea. For those of you who thought Asterix was being dickish when he told Obelix he was sick of his company, even though the giant roly-poly told everybody he fancied Miss Mackintosh, our hero tries chatting her up himself.
C'est fou, hein, l'énergie qu'il y a dans cette ville.
Meanwhile, Caesar has learned about the barrel containing magic potion. In the original story, it is because, while crossing the channel, the Gauls bombard a Roman galley, where a beat-up centurion hears Obelix discussing the barrel full of super strength-giving power, and naturally alerts his superiors on land. Here, there was no eavesdropping or careless talk, meaning Caesar is jumping to a conclusion that just so happens to be correct. Since the men hide the barrel at a local pub, even though it would have been a lot safer to bring it with them to Ophelia's house, the next couple of scenes play out with little alterations. The Romans confiscate all the barrels of wine in town, they sample them, they get drunk, our heroes rescue the barrel, Obelix gets drunk, and then their cart full of barrels is stolen. However, instead of getting drunk after only a couple helmets of wine, this time Obelix downs the entire barrel.
I couldn't help it.
Why?
My half was on the bottom.
And while chasing the cart thief, Asterix is captured, and reunited with Apu. The Romans were so intolerant of intolerance that they banned all British shops from selling copies of Spike Milligan's curry and chips.
Est-ce que je pourrais avoir un petit peu d'eau pour ma plante? Elle a soif.
Thank you for coming. I'll see you in hell.
Je suis ton père.
Mais non.
Attends, tu y as cru, là? Ah, si. Ah, mais si.
You're right, movie. I would rather be watching Toy Story 2. Or Mission Cleopatra. Asterix is saved by Obelix and Gingerbread. That is actually the character's name. Pain de pisse, spicy bread, gingerbread. Or illegal immigrant! But the rescue gets off to a less than smooth start.
C'est fou. Ici, même les leviers marchent à l'envers.
Worst Freddy Krueger origin story ever. Now for the Normans, aka Vikings section of the film. Just for Kix's bad boy attitude succeeds in seducing Ophelia, and she kisses him down by the sea, where they are both captured by one of my favourite two Ronnie sketches.
These gustings? It's a lot of gustings.
While Gaston Lagaffe's douchey brother is forced to undertake the seemingly impossible task of scaring the Vikings, Ophelia is rescued by Sir Anti-Paul Newmanax.
No, not yet. Not until me and Harvey get the rules straightened out.
Rules in a knife fight?
Tête de Piaf is taken back to the house, where he refuses to give the location of his tribe's location, although it could just be that he doesn't speak English, or franglais. And so Miss Mackintosh decides to teach him some civilized manners, using the torture method that centuries later would famously be used by Mr. Burns on The Simpsons' dog. The end result is, he still won't give them the information they need, but he's at least much more polite about the situation.
Croyez bien que j'en suis navré, mais un gentilhomme ne saurait trahir ses compagnons d'armes, n'est-ce pas?
After a couple of amusing attempts to make him leave, he finally takes the hint, but on the way accidentally unravels Miss Mackintosh's family tapestry.
6 generations ruined!
Tu voles un petit peu par là, tu fais un virage, tu remontes et puis tu vas te poser là.
Oh, vous inquiétez pas pour l'itinéraire, il est tout trouvé.
If you have read or seen Asterix and the Vikings and have paid attention to Just for Kicks saying that he wants to be a bard, you might be thinking that these two will connect themselves. Thus, instead of Cacophonix saving the day with his awful singing and lyre plucking, the lousy lad saves himself. Nope. A furious Miss Mackintosh marches past our heroes, and her mere approaching presence is enough to give the Normans their first taste of fear. The Vikings having a thoroughly pointless impact on this story is highlighted by the fact they didn't go anywhere near the village they were commissioned to raid. Plus, there was obviously no Roman escort for them, so how were they even supposed to find it? While Obelix begins a courtship with Miss Mackintosh, Caesar's frustration that the village still hasn't been conquered earns him an appointment with a psychiatrist. If the Senate warned you were spending too much money on soldiers, I can't imagine you'll be able to justify the cost of a therapy session. These two scenes could have been très amusant. Having Obelix's super strength and seemingly unfillable stomach been made use of as sight gags would have been a lot more entertaining and relevant to the character. And as for the psychoanalysis, I'll stick with the comedy duo of Jenny Seagrove and Dr. Strangelove. Thank you very much.
I have to write this down, because otherwise I simply forget it.
That's all right.
That's all right. I have to pick up the dry cleaning.
Meanwhile, Anticlimax has found the thief, and even without the presence of Asterix and Obelix, somehow manages to gain the information of who the crook sold the barrels to. Maybe they felt we didn't need to see how that sequence played out because we've already read it or watched it. In which case, why make this film at all? And now for the most memorable part of the comic, or at least iconic enough for it to be used as its front cover. Looks like this stadium reserves its front row for protagonists only.
C'est trop grand. On va pas y arriver. Faut mettre un homme à chaque issue et aller chercher des renforts.
Who are you, and why aren't you getting your ass kicked by Caesar for failing your own Norman-related scheme?
C'est mon tonneau. Lâche-le!
Bye, useless secondary villain. You were useless.
Ça, c'est pas bon.
You said it. None of them seem particularly devastated by the loss of the magic potion, considering this could mean the end for the Queen and Anticlimax's village. In the comic, Obelix actually starts crying, and like everything in this film, this scene was handled far better in the animated film. In this one, we get the second return of the gingerbread man, and because Obelix once again mentions his affection for Miss Mackintosh, Asterix's jealousy bubble bursts.
Je pense qu'elle est ridicule. Ridicule et grotesque.
I'm bored. I'm so bored.
As with the original story, Asterix lies, claiming he knows how to brew the magic potion, and the ingredients he uses are tea leaves. Though this time, instead of taking them from Getafix's hut for purely MacGuffin reasons, or being rewarded with them by sea merchants, Al Jolson has been in possession of the tea leaves throughout the movie, as a way to prevent him from feeling homesick.
Who needs their
tea leaves?
I do.
Ah, it's boiling! En avant! Marche!
Why didn't we just do this in the first place?
Shut it!
Ce qu'on leur a donné, c'est peut-être pas de la potion magique, mais ça s'appelle de l'espoir et c'est tout ce qui leur reste.
Oh, is that what's happening? Thank you for spelling it out in triplicate, movie. Asterix shakes the Romans' confidence, then the Brits charge out.
Oups, ils n'ont pas de pouvoir magique. C'était du bluff.
We're doomed. Doomed!
You're the man who fights to keep us all free.
Since you fell in the potion, you're as strong as can be.
And thus perished all enemies of the Queen. The Gauls are rewarded the OBE BC, Bandupis is praised for inventing the black and white minstrel show, Anticlimax finally releases some of his repressed emotions, and snogs Ophelia, and Obelix and Miss Mackintosh rip off a scene from Le Gendarme se Marie. Did I say rip off? I meant improved by adding more electricity. And for any fans of the series who are curious what Obelix's ejaculation face looks like, voila.
Mais tu verras toi aussi un jour, Astérix. Tu connaîtras l'amour.
One claymore! Wait, you're ending the film with a boy band concert rather than a banquet? Oh dear, and you were so close to getting an 8.2 star rating. Out of 100. But seriously though, folks, here's a shocking conclusion for you all. As a connoisseur of the series, I declare it not very good. I would honestly rather rewatch Asterix at the Olympic Games, and I hated that film. But I hated it because it had virtually nothing to do with the comic it was based on. But if you looked at that film without regarding it as an entry into the Asterix series, and just that wacky Brutus trying to cheat his way to victory, it was quite amusing, which is more than I can say for God Save Britannia. Unlike the Olympic Games movie, Asterix and Obelix are prominent characters, but there was only one scene where Obelix genuinely made me chuckle, and Asterix was an arse from start to finish, whose finest moment involved trying to usurp Anticlimax's girlfriend and his best buddy's crush. The inclusion of Just for Kicks and the Vikings is completely unjustified. Remove them from the film, and all you've lost is 15 minutes, which would still bring it to an hour and a half. The Vikings are never seen or even mentioned after they plummet off the cliff. Maybe instead of focusing on Caesar having an existential crisis, their revenge on the twerp who hired them should have been explored. One praise I give this film is that hearing the French actors doing posh English accents is pretty funny. Also, seeing this slimy turd getting crushed by a catapulted rock was quite pleasant. Good thing he wasn't a druid and that rock wasn't a menhir, otherwise he might have survived. This is Jeffrey Kitsch saying, I sailed, Fruit, what an utter shower. This film was a ghastly bore, what? a ghastly wild boar. Bye.